Hey there guys, my name's Dave and welcome to my channel. I'm a history teacher and I made this channel as a way to help share some content with people and hopefully help people learn a little bit about Canadian history. This video is going to serve as a bit of an introduction. I'd like to tell you a little bit about sort of my channel and what I want to try to accomplish here, and talk to you a little bit about how I think about history so you can get a sense about what you might expect from my videos as we proceed along here. If you want to reach out and connect with me, I would really love to hear from you. You can reach me in three main places. Number one, I've got a website at www.okteach.ca, and anything I post on my videos, I'm going to actually post on my website as well. So this is any slides or resources or anything like that, I'm going to put up there for you to access from home. So if you find that valuable, you can go check me out there. You can also reach me by Twitter at @theokteacher or by email at okteacher@gmail.com. I would really love to hear from you if you want to reach out in any of those places. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the curriculum and the scope that I use here. I know it's probably not the most exciting thing, but if you want to check out the curriculum document, I've put a link in this presentation there. The Canadian History course in Ontario covers the period from 1914 to the present, and it's basically broken down into four main content strands, depending on time period. There's also a fifth strand which talks about sort of the process of historical inquiry, which is an important part of my teaching in the classroom and something that I'd like to communicate here. In practice, there are really six main sort of units of study that I try to do when I teach history. World War I, the 1920s, the 1930s, World War II, post-war Canada, as well as the sort of modern period, 1982 to the present. That's how I structure my course in the classroom, and I'd like to try to mirror that sort of format here on YouTube. Who am I trying to reach here? Well, the first group that I really like to try to reach is students. I'm making these videos during the sort of COVID lockdown, and I know that there's a lot of students who are missing the opportunity to learn in school, and my hope is that these videos would be useful to anybody who wants to continue studying or continue reviewing any of their material at school, but if, any material that they're missing at school. But of course, it could be useful when schools start back up again. So my hope is that I'm going to produce some videos that are useful for students here. I would also like to make these videos to help parents out as well. Maybe you want to relive the thrill of your high school history stuff, but more likely, if you're looking for some resources to help talk to your kids about history and to sort of get engaged and involved with what they're learning, I would encourage you to check out my videos here for that purpose as well. And also educators, any teachers who are teaching history, and particularly now in the shutdown, looking for ways to help communicate information and get information out to students. My hope is that you find these videos useful as well. My approach is fairly straightforward. I would like to try to, first of all, give an overview of kind of the important events and ideas in Canadian history from 1914 to the present. But understanding that I can't give you everything you need to know here, also to give you some information and some resources that you can access to go learn about stuff in some more detail here. Really what history is trying to do, I'd like to try to tell the story of Canada from 1914 to the present. And my feeling is that if you can understand that period in our history, then you really understand a lot more who we are today. And that's kind of always been my goal in history, is not just to tell you the events of history, but to tell you about how the events from our history help to make us the country that we are today. And the last piece here is probably the most important. There's a whole strand in our Canadian history curriculum that talks about the historical inquiry process. And that's a piece that I think is really, really important and often overlooked by people. When you talk about, well, when you ask people, for example, what is history? They will often tell you that history is just remembering dates, memorizing first this happened, then this happened, then this happened. And I would argue that that's completely missing the point of what history is. History is, by its very nature, an inquiry process. It is a process of investigation, a process of asking questions, and a process of analysis. And when I teach in the classroom, that's something I really do try to emphasize. It's a little bit harder, I think, to do that via YouTube. And what I thought I would try to do with this channel is sort of model some of that process here, and support some of that process, so that when people have finished watching my videos, they get a sense about what it looks like to approach history, not only from a here are the events, let's memorize them process, but also from a how do we investigate and drive inquiry into historical events. So that's what I really like to try to accomplish here on this channel. One big sort of theory and one big part of my approach is the idea of historical thinking. And I draw a lot of this from an organization called the Historical Thinking Project. And any history teachers or any educators who want to learn more about this, I would strongly recommend this as part of your practice as a history teacher. You can check them out. I put the link in the handout here. It's the Historical Thinking Project, and essentially what they do there, what they've put forward is 6 big concepts that we can use to sort of support historical inquiry, and I really do try to emphasize those in my practice. I'm going to give you a brief overview of kind of what they are now and how they're used. By the way, if you're interested in learning more, I would really suggest checking out this book called The Big Six. It goes into much more detail about these historical thinking concepts, and I would really encourage you to check them out. You can find the link to that book at the link in the slideshow that I'm using here now. Essentially, there are 6 big concepts for historical thinking that really do help support that inquiry model, and using these really, I think, gives you a better picture about why things matter. So, number 1 is establishing historical significance. What this means is that we can't just look at events in history as living in a vacuum. Anything that we are studying in history is not important because we're studying it, but we're studying it because it's important. What makes it important, though? That's a crucial part of our historical inquiry. We want to link these events to larger trends and to larger stories that actually tell us about who we are today. When we look at battles in World War I, for example, I'm not just studying those because it was World War I and therefore it was important. I'm studying those with an eye to thinking about what's the impact of those and how does that create significance, right? Another big piece of historical inquiry is using primary evidence as the basis for your inquiry. A history textbook is great. It gives you an overview of key ideas, but if we really want to study history, we have to look at evidence from the time and the place. We need to look at newspapers from the time. We need to look at firsthand accounts. We need to look at pictures. Historical inquiry starts with primary evidence, and it's something that you can use to drive your inquiry into historical events and ideas. The next 2, continuity and change and cause and consequences, I think are huge in terms of determining how things are important. Continuity and change means investigating events as part of a larger pattern, right? Where is the pattern? Where are the patterns that we see, and when do we see change? How does change create new patterns? What happens after something changes? What are the big differences between this event and an event that came before? When we look at change and continuity and patterns, we really do get a sense of when important events happen and why they're important. Cause and consequence really is a crucial piece as well in terms of understanding the significance. If I want to investigate a historical event, I want to look at, well, what are the causes of that event? And I also want to look at what are the consequences of it. It allows us to stitch together sort of a timeline, not just based on chronology, not just based on first this happened, then this happened, then this happened, but rather when this happened, this was a result. And because of these 2 things, a third thing happened. And we can stitch together these events in a narrative that's based on one thing leading to another, and eventually that allows us to say, and this is where we came from today, by looking at this cause and or by looking at these sort of causality throughout our history. 2 more pieces here that really do help us understand historical events. One of them is the idea of historical perspective. Which is that there are differences between us in the present and the people in the past. Very often when we're studying history, we're looking at historical events and we say things like, well, how could we be so stupid back then? Uh, Boy, were we ever racist back then? And it's very easy to look at things in the past through the lens of the present, and we miss some pieces about what that tells us back then. It's very easy to dismiss that. And understanding our historical perspective is crucial to helping us understand the events of the past. And the final piece here is that historical study has an ethical dimension to it as well. That when we study the past, we can learn things from the past that help us to understand ethical issues today. For example, when we look at immigration patterns in the past, and we can look at how things were done back then, and we can determine what it was about that we found distasteful, perhaps. That can really help us understand our approach to immigration today, and our approach to minority groups and things of that nature. By studying these ethical problems in the past, it really kind of frames the issue in a modern context, and really helps us understand who we are today. Now, history then is a process of inquiry where we're going to learn about a bunch of things that happened in the past. But if we can use these historical thinking concepts, these events don't just live in the past. They are events that can be very influential on us in the present today. Anyway, that's my kind of thinking. That's my mindset when I study history, and that's something I really do try to emphasize when I'm working in my classroom, and it's something I'd like to try to get across here. So that's a general introduction about who I am and what you can expect with this channel. If it's something that you're interested in being a part of, I would encourage you to subscribe to my channel and check me out. You can follow me on Twitter, and I will be posting announcements there when I have new videos coming out. Come check back often. Come see what I'm doing, and be involved. I would love to have you along for the ride. Thanks very much, guys. All the best to you, and I'll see you in the next video.